The fortress was dying. A gaping wound ran along its fuselage, its skin peeled back to reveal the skeletal structure within. Two of its four mighty Wright Cyclone engines were dead and feathered, their propellers frozen in a silent, final salute. Hydraulic fluid, the lifeblood of the aircraft's control systems, streamed behind it like a ghostly contrail. And inside, the 10 men of the Wee Willie, B-17F, Flying Fortress, knew with chilling certainty that their ordeal was far from over. They had survived the flak bursts over Bremen, they had fought off the relentless attacks of Luftwaffe fighters, but now, returning to the sanctuary of English soil, they faced their most perilous challenge yet. The wheels were gone. The landing gear, shattered by enemy fire, refused to lower. They were flying a 36,000-pound bomber that had no way to land. This is the story of sheer skill, of impossible courage, and of a pilot who, against all odds, was about to attempt the impossible. This is the story of when a B-17's landing gear failed, and one pilot's belly landing saved 10 men. The date was December 12, 1942. The 8th Air Force was still a young command, building its strength for the long, bloody air war over Europe. Based at RAF Buzzingbourne in Cambridgeshire, England, was the 91st Bombardment Group Heavy, the Ragged Irregulars. Among its crews was that of B-17 Iphidius, book serial number 4124520, nicknamed Wee Willie. Her pilot was First Lieutenant John Jack K. Morgan, a 23-year-old from Texas. His co-pilot was Second Lieutenant James R. Jim Wade. Completing the 10-man crew were the navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, radio operator, ball turret, gunner, two waist gunners, and the tail gunner, CIS. They were not aces, CO. They were 10 young men doing a brutal job. Their mission that day was part of a larger effort to cripple German industrial capacity. The target, the Focke-Wulf aircraft factory in Bremen, a heavily defended target deep in Reich territory. For a B-17 crew, a mission was a 9-hour trial by fire. First came the bone-chilling cold, often 40 degrees below zero at altitude. Then, the ever-present threat of mechanical failure, But the true terror came from the enemy, the black, oily puffs of flak that filled the sky, shredding metal and flesh with indiscriminate fury, and the sleek, deadly German fighters Messerschmitt, Bf-19s and Focke-Wulf, FW-190s, that would scream in from all angles, their cannons and machine guns blazing. The success of a mission was not measured in targets destroyed, but in whether you made it home. For Wee Willie and her crew, the definition of home was about to become terrifyingly narrow. The mission began like any other. A pre-dawn breakfast. The briefing that revealed the dreaded target. Bremen, the cumbersome process of donning electrically heated flight suits and Mae West life preservers. Then the roar of engines igniting one by one, the slow, jolting taxi, and the powerful, earth-shaking takeoff into the gray English sky. Wee Willie joined the vast, staggered formation, a constellation of aluminum and hope climbing towards 25,000 feet. The initial run over the North Sea was quiet, the crew lost in their own thoughts. But as they crossed the Dutch coast, the German defenses sprang to life. Pause first. The flak began sporadic at first, then intensifying into a murderous black carpet that buffeted the fortress. The plane shuddered with each nearby explosion. Shrapnel rattled against the fuselage like deadly hail. Then came the fighters, bandits 10 o'clock high, crackled over the interphone. A swarm of Bf-19s dove through the formation, their 20mm cannons flashing, the air inside Wee Willie filled with the deafening roar of her own .50 caliber machine guns, the smell of cordite, and the shouted warnings of the gunners. It was during one of these relentless passes that disaster struck. A Focke-Wulf FW-190, making a head-on attack, lined up on Wee Willie. Tracers converged in the thin air. The Germans' cannon shells found their mark. A violent explosion rocked the aircraft. One shell ripped into the right wing, severing fuel lines and disabling the No. 3 engine. Another struck the nose, wounding the bombardier, but the most critical damage was hidden from view. A shell had torn into the belly of the aircraft, directly impacting the hydraulic system and the mechanism for the main landing gear. By 1300 hours, Wee Willie was a cripple. She was losing fuel and altitude, her formation pulling away, leaving her alone, wounded bird. Lieutenant Morgan and co-pilot Wade fought the controls, their muscles straining as the aircraft yawed to the right. The interphone was a steady stream of damage reports. No. 3, engine out, fire extinguished, hydraulic pressure dropping fast. Bombay doors are jammed open. They had jettisoned their bombs over the target. But now, the weight of their survival was heavier than any payload. The immediate threat was the long flight back across the North Sea for 2 agonizing hours. The crew prepared for a potential ditching. They threw out every piece of expendable equipment, ammunition, flak jackets, even their prized .50 caliber machine guns to lighten the plane and increase their gliding range. The gunners, their positions now silent and freezing, scanned the skies for any further sign of the Luftwaffe. The flight engineer monitored the failing fuel gauges, calculating and recalculating their chances of reaching the English coast. It was a race against time, distance, and gravity. And through it all, Morgan and Wade held the fortress steady, a testament to their training and fortitude. Miraculously, the English coastline emerged from the haze. A collective, shaky sigh of relief passed through the crew. They had made it. They were over friendly territory, but their celebration was short-lived. As they descended and Morgan went through the pre-landing checklist, the next, more immediate crisis revealed itself. "Gear down," Morgan ordered. Wade moved the landing gear lever. A warning light on the instrument panel should have turned from red to green, indicating the wheels were down and locked. It remained a stubborn, ominous red. The hydraulic pressure gauge read 0. The system was dead. "Try the emergency hand pump," Morgan said, his voice tight. The flight engineer, Technical Sergeant Philip L. Cobb, rushed to the hydraulic hand pump located near the radio room. 4 minutes that felt like hours. He pumped furiously, his muscles burning with the effort. Pause, but it was film, no use. The lines were severed. The fluid was gone. The gear was not simply malfunctioning. It was destroyed. They had no wheels. The realization sent a cold wave of dread through the aircraft. They were flying a machine designed to land on a robust, wheeled undercarriage. A B-17 landing on its belly landing or wheels-up landing, was a desperate, last-resort maneuver. The risk of the fortress catching a wingtip, cartwheeling, and disintegrating in a fireball was astronomically high. The massive fuel tanks in the wings, still holding hundreds of gallons of high-octane fuel, could ignite. The bomb sight in the nose, which contained a small amount of explosive, was a secondary detonation risk. They were sitting in a flying tinderbox with no safe way down. Morgan keyed his microphone, his tone calm but authoritative. "This is the pilot. We have a landing gear failure. We are going to attempt a belly landing. I need everyone in crash positions. Now." The crew moved with a grim, practiced efficiency. The wounded bombardier was carefully moved to the more protected radio compartment. Gunners secured their turrets and took up positions along the fuselage, bracing their backs against the main spar, the strongest part of the aircraft. They removed their helmets, loosened their boots to prevent broken ankles, and tucked their chins to their chests. The interior of the plane, once a cacophony of war, fell into an eerie, tense silence, broken only by the labored drone of the two remaining engines and the whistle of wind through the shrapnel holes. Morgan and Wade, alone in the cockpit, now faced their impossible task. Clear. They had to set the 70-foot wingspan aircraft down on its delicate aluminum belly without any control once it made contact with the ground. They chose a wide, open field near the village of Falmere, not far from their base. They circled, dumping the last of their fuel to reduce the fire risk, a shimmering cascade of aviation gasoline pouring from the wings. They lowered the flaps manually, slowing the giant bomber to its absolute minimum stall speed. The ground rushed up to meet them. The two pilots shared a glance, a silent communication of shared responsibility and grim resolve. There was nothing more to be done. The final approach had begun. Morgan's hands were steady on the control yoke. His focus was absolute. He had to achieve a perfect wings-level attitude. Any tilt, any yaw, and the aircraft would ground loop, tearing itself apart. He had to touch down on the softest, most even surface he could find. And he had to do it with the precision of a surgeon. "Cut the engines," he ordered Wade, one by one. The two remaining right cyclones were shut down. The sudden quiet was deafening, a stark contrast to the hours of engine roar. Now the only sound was the wind whistling past the cockpit glass. Wee Willie was a silent, heavy glider, committed to its fate. Morgan flared the aircraft, lifting the nose slightly to slow their descent and ensure the entire fuselage would make contact with the ground simultaneously. He was flying purely on instinct and feel, his eyes fixed on the field ahead. Pause then. A contact horror, grinding shriek of tearing metal filled the world. The entire airframe convulsed as the belly of the fortress met the English soil. Storm of dirt, grass, and sparks erupted around them. The pilots were thrown violently against their harnesses. Inside the fuselage, the crew was jolted and shaken, holding on for their lives as the world disintegrated into a deafening, violent chaos. The sound was unlike anything they had ever heard, the agonizing protest of a machine being destroyed to save the men inside. For what felt like an eternity, Wee Willie plowed across the field, her belly gouging a deep furrow in the earth. The bow turret, hanging beneath the fuselage, was instantly sheared off. The bombardier's plexiglass nose shattered, but Morgan's perfect landing held true. The wings remained level. The fuselage stayed intact, skidding forward in a relatively straight line. The deceleration was brutal, but it was a controlled, survivable crash. The fortress slid for nearly 500 feet, shedding parts and spewing debris, before finally, mercifully, lurching to a stop. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the pinging of hot metal and the hiss of steam. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the training kicked in. Get everybody out. Now. Go, go, go. Tick-tock crew, shaken but miraculously mobile, began evacuating through the ripped-open waist-gun positions and the top hatch. They helped their wounded comrade. There was no fire. The fuel dumping had worked. Within minutes, all 10 men were standing on the grass, staring in stunned disbelief at the wreck of their aircraft. Willie was a total loss, her back broken, her underside a mangled ruin, but she had held together just long enough. She had done her final duty. The 10 men of Wee Willie had cheated death. Cole survived. The wounded bombardier received medical attention and would eventually recover. The belly landing, performed by Lieutenant Jack Morgan on December 12, 1942, was a textbook example of airmanship under the most extreme duress. It was a feat that combined technical skill with icy nerves and a profound sense of responsibility for the lives of his crew. The mission did not go unrecognized. Seat for his extraordinary achievement, superior performance, and heroism. First Lieutenant John K. Morgan was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. The citation specifically highlighted his superior airmanship and cool courage in the face of grave danger that saved the lives of his 9 crewmates. The rest of the crew was also decorated for their valor and composure during the mission and the harrowing return. But the legacy of Wee Willie extends beyond medals. The successful landing was studied by Air Force engineers. It provided invaluable real-world data on the structural integrity of the B-17 and the dynamics of a wheels-up landing. It proved that the Flying Fortress was not just a name. It was a rugged, resilient machine that, in the right hands, could bring its boys home even when all seemed lost. The story spread through the 91st Bomb Group and the entire 8th Air Force, becoming a legend, a tangible piece of evidence that even in the face of certain disaster, there was a chance, however slim, for survival. It was a story that gave hope to thousands of other airmen who would face their own trials in the skies over Europe. The wreck of Wee Willie was eventually scrapped, her aluminum recycled for the war effort. But the story of her final flight and the 10 men who walked away from it endures. It stands as a timeless testament to courage, skill, and the unbreakable bond between a crew and their aircraft. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.